This is Land of Havilah, Isaiah 18. The chapter is 7 verses. It's a prophecy concerning a distant, unnamed land beyond Ethiopia in verse 1, and concerning the entire world in verse 3, verse 1. Ah, the land of rustling of wings, which is beyond the rivers of Ethiopia, that sends ambassadors by the sea, even in vessels of papyrus on the waters, saying, Go, you swift messengers, to a nation tall and smooth, to a people awesome from their beginning onward, a nation that measures out and treads down, whose land the rivers divide. Comment in verse 1, Ethiopia is another name for Cush, which was south of Egypt on the Nile River. So why does verse 1 say rivers of Ethiopia plural? The Nile is multi-channeled in places, which could explain it, and it's formed by the coming together of the white and blue Nile rivers, which could explain it. But the prophecy addresses a land beyond that in verse 1. It's a land so far away that apparently Isaiah doesn't have a name for it. Whoever they are, they send messengers over the sea in papyrus boats to a nation tall and smooth, whose land the rivers divide, which gets even further into the unknown. It's an unknown nation communicating across the sea with a nation even much farther. Thor Heyerdahl proved in 1970 that a papyrus boat could cross the Atlantic. He did so in a boat called the Ra-2. Coming up in verses 3 to 7, which is the rest of the chapter, it's a prophecy to the entire world, to all those distant nations out there somewhere. The last verse lets us know that all along it's been a prophecy of the millennium, that even the strongest nations of the earth will serve Yahweh. Verse 3. All you inhabitants of the world and you dwellers on the earth, when a banner is lifted up on the mountains, look, when the trumpet is blown, listen. For Yahweh said to me, I will be still, and I will see in my dwelling place like a clear heat in sunshine, like a cloud of dew in the heat of harvest. For before the harvest, when the blossom is over and the flower becomes a ripening grape, he'll cut off the sprigs with pruning hooks, and he'll cut down and take away the spreading branches. They will be left together for the ravenous birds of the mountains and for the animals of the earth. The ravenous birds will summer on them, and all the animals of the earth will winter on them. In that time a present will be brought to Yahweh of armies from a people tall and smooth, even from a people awesome from their beginning onward, a nation that measures out and treads down, whose land the rivers divide, to the place of the name of Yahweh of armies, Mount Zion. Comment in verse 3, all the dwellers of the earth will hear a trumpet and see a banner lifted up on the mountains. How could the entire world hear a trumpet unless it's the return of the Lord Jesus Christ? Isaiah 27:13, Matthew 24:31, and 1 Thessalonians 4:16. And what banner could it be except Yahweh himself? Isaiah 49:22, come to the earth as the Lord Jesus. In chapter 11, verse 10, Isaiah said, It will happen in that day that the nations will seek the root of Jesse, who stands as a banner of the peoples, and his resting place will be glorious, end quote. The root of Jesse is Jesus, and his resting place will be Mount Zion, Isaiah 2:3. Isaiah said in the next verse, It will happen in that day that the Lord will set his hand again the second time to recover the remnant that's left of his people from Assyria, from Egypt, from Pathros, from Cush, from Elam, from Shinar, from Hamath, and from the islands of the sea, end quote, which is pretty much the entire known world as far as Isaiah was concerned. Then in the verses after that, quote, He'll set up a banner for the nations and will assemble the outcasts of Israel and gather together the dispersed of Judah from the four corners of the earth, end quote. So he'll draw the nations to himself, and he's drawing the dispersed of Judah to himself from the four corners of the earth. It's either symbolic of Jesus drawing the nations to himself spiritually, or it's literally that he'll rule the earth from Zion in the millennium and draw the earth to himself from there. Or in your narrator's opinion, it's both. We're already in the age that he's drawing the world to himself, and he'll draw the world to himself literally in the millennial age to come. In verse 4, Yahweh has a vision. He looks in the distance and sees the shimmering heat rising up off the land in summer and a cloud in the sky in the fall. But while he's seeing those ordinary sights season after season, he's daydreaming about the extraordinary future, how he'll blow that trumpet and lift up his banner as he just described in verse 3, and in the verse after, verse 5, how he'll prune his own, making disciples, as Jesus described in John 15. He's thinking about the whole process of making disciples across the world and drawing them to himself. That's his vision for the world. In verse 6, the prunings will be left on the ground for the ravenous birds and animals, which means it doesn't matter what happens to the prunings. Good riddance to the prunings. It was all dead weight and didn't belong in Yahweh's scheme of the future anyway. He's looking forward to the day he makes disciples across the world. Then in the last verse, verse 7, a present will be brought to Yahweh from that most distant of lands he mentioned earlier, that place of tall and smooth people, a powerful nation, people awesome from their beginning onward. It speaks of whatever powerful nations are out there in the entire world. In verse 7, they'll bring their gift to Mount Zion, which will be the place that Yahweh puts his name. The most distant and powerful of the world are submitting themselves to Yahweh in that day. Isaiah 19 is next.